This video is brought to you by NordVPN. Give yourself options online. Go to nordvpn.com/side projects to get a special holiday deal on a 2-year plan at a huge discount, plus an additional month for free. More on them in a bit. When you hear the phrase World War II, no doubt you only imagine scenes of destruction and the millions that lost their lives. Yeah, the war impacted society forever, and its horrors were enough to inspire nations to try and prevent it from ever happening again. But luckily, those years didn't only have negative outcomes. Unique circumstances forced humanity to look for original solutions to problems. As a result, in environments like the battlefield and in hospitals, humans made new discoveries. Also, countries poured time and money into projects that they just didn't need before. So what does this all matter? Well, for one thing, you're staring at a screen which wouldn't have existed if not for the brave and brilliant people creating computers to get the upper hand over the Nazi onslaught. So today, let me share a few interesting World War II inventions with you. They started out as wartime solutions and later on started affecting civilian life. And today, you probably can't imagine your life without at least one or two of these. Now, a few decades ago, people didn't think of a box with a screen when they heard the word computer. Before the machines we know today, computers were people that were able to do complex calculations. They did important work even for space travel as late as the 1950s. But of course, the human race always wants things done faster and better. So even before the war, people were hoping to do these complex calculations through mechanical methods. But it was the war that really fast-tracked much of the innovation in the industry. So the major brands like Apple should sort of be thanking the scientists of World War II for giving us the foundation of the digital electronic devices that we find in most homes or really pockets today. During wartime, a priority for many forces was encrypting messages and decoding the enemy's communications after intercepting them. At the time, a Lorenz cipher machine and the Enigma cipher machine from the 1920s existed. These were used by the Germans for encoding. The Allied forces' goal? Well, decoding a message in time for it to be helpful in the war effort. But this required a more advanced approach than was possible at the time, than was really humanly possible. This need prompted countries on all sides of the fight to invest time and money in developing more advanced machines. Throughout the war years, new devices were being worked on, like the CNC, or complex number calculator, which was designed in 1939. In 1941, Conrad Zuse built the Z3, which could be used for aerodynamic calculations. The Atomsoft Berry computer, or ABC for short, was completed in 1942, and many believe this influenced other designers like John Mauchly, and more about him later. Britain's Bletchley Park Tommy Flowers designed the Colossus, which can be seen as the first electronic programmable digital computer. It was used to understand German encoded messages. By the end of the war, as much as 90% of Germany's non-Morse code messages could be interpreted correctly. With this machine, we're talking about breaking the code within hours instead of the weeks that it used to take. Many believe this was key to winning and shortening the war. The US also needed calculations done quickly, for example, battlefield equations. This led to the ENIAC, which was short for Electronic Numerical Integrator and Computer. The person involved here? That guy, John Mauchly. However, this was only finished in 1945. And fun fact, you needed 15,000 square feet of space to house ENIAC, and at the time that would have cost you $400,000, which is slightly bigger than the device you're probably using right now. So computers like the ENIAC were built with wartime purposes in mind, but their abilities had commercial value as well. So as early as 1946, the ENIAC was being sold to the public. Then as the years passed, the technology improved and was modified, resulting in smaller units that were more powerful and, luckily for us, cost a whole lot less. And today computers are just absolutely everywhere. To be fair, the history of the ballpoint pen starts as far back as the late 19th century. At the time, people mostly wrote with fountain pens, but these had various limitations. From not working on certain surfaces to smudging and wasting time filling them, many people were just getting a bit fed up with it all. So already in 1888, John J. Loud filed a patent for a ballpoint pen. This was his attempt at finding a better way to write on surfaces like leather or coarse writing paper. Unfortunately, John's invention didn't work for paper, popular, so with very limited applications, his design fell to the wayside and his patent eventually lapsed. Fast forward to the 20th century, and you see many patents filed by people trying to come up with a better way to write. One of these was Laszlo Biro, who worked in Hungary's newspaper industry. His stroke of genius was realizing how much faster newspaper ink dried compared to fountain pens. With his dentist brother Georgi's help, Georgi knew more about chemistry than Laszlo, the pair created a new type of ink and pens with ball socket mechanisms. This enabled ink to flow fast but controlled and without it drying in the chamber. Now this all happened in 1938, but in 1941, because of the war, the inventors fled to Argentina. There they filed a patent, and the design was licensed by Frederick Marles. Frederick was an engineer in Britain who owned Marles Aircraft. He started producing the pens through his company, and eventually they ended up in the hands of the Royal Air Force. They ordered 30,000 units. Why? Well, the specific design still worked well at high altitudes, unlike fountain pens that often started leaking in those conditions. So pilots were much better off with biros, that's what they were called at the time, to make notes during the heat of battle. Now, the type of pen that you might use today is not exactly like the ones the pilots used to help win the war, but Biro's design is the foundation for what followed. Companies like Eversharp, Eberhard, Faber, Reynolds International Pen Company, and many more made their own type of ballpoint pen. In 1945, you could buy one for $12.50, which in 2020 terms is about $180. But some companies folded because the market became saturated, and it took a lot of improvements to reach the almost problem-free designs that we're used to today. Now, you might use a Bic to write with today, but they didn't become profitable until their writes the first time, every time marketing campaign. And luckily, with so many companies trying to find the perfect pen design, competition was rife and vendors had to drop their prices to stay competitive. So now you can pick up a pen for a lot less than $180. And how many pens are in use today? To give you an idea, in the United States, it's estimated that 2 billion pens are sold annually. Just remember that it wasn't always that easy to make notes, and it was World War II that gave the humble pen a platform to show off its value. Now, we'll get back to today's video in just a moment, but first a word from today's video sponsor, NordVPN. If you're a fan of my channels, then there's a good chance you've seen me talk about the benefits of NordVPN before. Look, this isn't 1997. Too many people are looking for your internet history. Bad actors trying to steal your data and personal information, corporations tracking your browser activity, and bombarding you with spookily accurate ads. Who needs any of that nonsense? That's why NordVPN is so crucial. They're providing you with virtual security at a great rate, with absolutely zero logs on your internet history kept on their end. And look, a common misconception is that VPNs are just for people who want to play defense, but they're not just about protecting yourself. You'd be amazed the different streaming options you get when you jump onto a server from another country. Protect yourself or just play around. Buy it for yourself or consider it a gift for another internet user in your life. With NordVPN, you got a lot of options, plus a 30-day money-back guarantee if you decide that it's not right for you. There's never been a better time to enhance your online experience with NordVPN, because right now, you guys can take advantage of a special holiday deal that NordVPN is running. Head to nordvpn.com/side projects for a huge discount on a 2-year plan that comes with an additional month for free. That's nordvpn.com/side projects, or just follow the link in the description box below. And now back to today's video. Going on a trip soon? Flying to your destination? Well, chances are you'll be flying in an airplane powered by jet engines. So, back to World War II. At the time that war was declared, propeller engines were the standard aircraft used by the military. To be clear, a propeller engine powers a drive shaft which connects to a propeller. In the case of a jet engine, you get thrust because of gas discharge. Now, people were aware that there were better ways to fly. Actually, patents for jet engines had been filed as early as 1908, but the inventors didn't succeed in creating a usable aircraft. In the years leading up to the war, the race was on to have better planes. Frank Whittle did exceptional work for the RAF, but it was Germany who had a successful prototype as early as 1939. Only in 1941 did the Allied forces achieve their first jet plane flight. In truth, because it was still very early in their development, jet engines didn't have a huge influence on the war's outcome. But the advances the brilliant engineers made resulted in a complete change in transportation. After the war, but only by the 1950s, jet engines became available for commercial use rather than only for combat aircraft. aircraft, and within a short period of time, around the 1960s, if you were flying in a large civilian aircraft, it was powered by a jet engine. Of course, the relatively new approach to flying needed improvement, so they only became more fuel efficient in the 1970s. Still, thanks to a lot of work going into jet engines for wartime use, it took less than 2 decades for them to be popular across the globe and to become the standard in the industry. And it's what makes your globe trotting so affordable. Another concept that may need clarification is radar. Most of us know the word, but maybe we all don't exactly know what it means. Well, radar is short for radio detection and ranging. Basically, radio waves will reflect back when they hit objects like metal, which means you can detect the position of a ship by sending out these waves and waiting for a reflection. Ship detection was what it was originally used for when people like Christian Halsmeyer demonstrated the technology in 1904. This wasn't its only application, since it could also help to map out thunderstorms. But with the war approaching, multiple countries invested time and money into radar technology that could help them get the upper hand. They needed devices that could provide range and angular location. By 1939, 8 different nations had systems to provide this information, and it became key for offensive and defensive tactics. By 1945, radar was used on land, sea, and even in the air. So where can you find this technology today? It's the tech that helps to automatically take a photo of you when you drive too fast past a traffic camera. The technology even made it possible to make microwave ovens a standard appliance in most homes these days. This is all thanks to a small gadget called the cavity magnetron. As small as your hand during the war, it provided some of the benefits of radar technology. Then a scientist noted that a radar melted his candy bar. After experimenting with other food items like popcorn, the modern microwave was born. In meteorology, scientists use it for weather prediction, which allows us to know when we should take an umbrella to work. With thousands of soldiers on battlefields across Europe, you can imagine there were doctors who were pushed to their limits. But this also forced them to get creative and find new ways to treat people and hopefully save more lives. This unfortunate scenario resulted in a few healthcare practices that are still being implemented today. Perhaps even it saved you or a loved one's life at some point. Most of us can't imagine modern society without some of these things like penicillin. Even though the value of penicillin notatum was discovered in 1928, you know, the fact that it has antibacterial properties, it really wasn't used on a large scale yet. Come World War II, and across the globe, the healthcare industry shifted their focus. From both the US and Britain, scientists started collaborating to find the best way to help the troops. They knew they needed to produce it in large quantities, and they started experiments to find the best way to do just that. Methods like deep tank fermentation provided some solutions, and by 1944, much more was possible than at the start of the war. So when the Allied forces were preparing to invade Normandy, part of their plan was having enough penicillin. They knew a high number of injured soldiers was imminent and unavoidable, and they wanted help fighting infections. So what's the number they aimed for? 2.3 million doses. Manufacturing in such large quantities meant that news of the drug started spreading, so the public and the world became enamored with the miracle drug. And today, the drug which fights off bacterial infections is still absolutely vital in healthcare. Next up, transfusions. Another challenge for doctors was helping soldiers who lost a lot of blood. On the battlefield, they needed a fast solution to do blood transfusions. You probably know that when doing whole-body transfusions, you must ensure the donated blood matches the patient's blood type. Blood plasma is a better option than whole blood since you can give it to anyone. It was Charles Drew, an American, who standardized the process of blood plasma transfusion and gave medical personnel another tool to save soldiers' lives. During a blood plasma transfusion, doctors would use freeze-dried blood plasma. For the process, doctors would use 2 sterile jars to mix the plasma with water before it traveled into the patient's veins. Even though this method may not be used today, it still marked an important development in medical history, since each chapter in that history helped healthcare practitioners develop techniques that you find in hospitals today. Next up, vaccines. Did you know that the 1918 influenza epidemic actually affected the First World War? Like the discovery of freeze-drying blood plasma, this is another World War I event that affected the Second World War. It prompted America to do more research regarding flu vaccines, and the US Army actually sponsored their development. So by 1945, there was an approved vaccine for soldiers which became available to the public as early as 1946. A little bonus fact here, a scientist involved in that process later developed the vaccine for polio. You've probably heard of him, Jonas Salk. It's almost inspiring to hear how people ended up making the best of a very bad situation, and one could stand in awe of the creativity that some had to find solutions without having a ton of resources. When you look at the technological development of the past few decades, humans seem to have no end to their innovativeness. Yet, let's just hope it doesn't take horrendous events like wars to push us on to even greater discoveries. So I really hope you found today's video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below. Don't forget to subscribe, and as always, thank you for watching.